winter in Pine Hollow Valley was always brutal. But that particular season felt unnatural, like something old and forgotten had been awakened in the trees. Temperatures fell lower than anything I'd ever experienced, and the wind seemed to travel with a voice of its own, carrying low moans across the frozen forest. I had been living in a lonely cabin at the base of Cedar Ridge for nearly a year, working remote, appreciating the quiet. Or so I thought. Isolation feels peaceful until the forest begins watching you back. The first sign that something was wrong happened on a night I returned from a late shift. The moon was shockingly bright, glowing like a silver disk through thin, fast-moving clouds. As I trudged along the snow-covered path toward my cabin, the pale light reflected off the white blanket so strongly it almost hurt to look at. That's when I saw them footprints in the snow leading up my porch steps. Not mine, not any boot pattern one recognized. L'Onstrie de Dipimprint. Whatever had made them was either extremely heavy or carrying something heavy. And disturbingly, there were no footprints leading away. I froze at the edge of the clearing, listening. The forest was painfully silent, no owls, no wind, no shuffling of branches. I felt like the trees were holding their breath, waiting for me to move. Every instinct screamed for me to get back, I cried, draw away, but judgment, première went on seed, everything else, not life. The heater hummed steadily. My coffee mug was where I left it. But the sense of being watched lingered like a cold hand on the back of my neck. That night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to the unmistakable sound of snow crunching right outside my bedroom. Window, slow, heavy, deliberate. Step, pause, step. The footsteps stopped beneath my window. The glass was coated with frost, but I could see the faint shape of a tall shadow on the other side. Something was standing inches from my sleeping face. I held my breath, listening to the ragged breathing on the other side. Then came a sound that still haunts me, a long, slow dragging noise, like fingernails being pulled across ice-covered glass. My pulse hammered in my ears as I stared at the window, too terrified to move. Finally, the footsteps resumed, circling the cabin. The crunching continued for almost an hour. I didn't sleep again that night. When morning finally came, I inspected the area outside. Fresh footprints, huge ones, encircled the entire cabin in erratic, dizzying loops. At certain points, the prints overlapped themselves, like whatever was out there had been pacing, turning, stumbling, or spiraling into some kind of frenzy. I called the local ranger, a grizzled older man named Clark, who'd lived in Pine Hollow all his life. When he saw the prints, his expression tightened. "You're not the first," he muttered, kneeling to study them closer. "We've been seeing these near abandoned cabins. Hunting shacks. Even the old mill. What kind of tracks are they?" I asked. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw something I didn't expect: fear. "They're not boots," he said quietly. "And they're not human." Not exactly. Anyway, he wouldn't elaborate. For 2 days afterward, nothing happened. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the shadow, the breathing, the dragging sound. Cold weather can play tricks on the mind. But on the fourth night, I heard the sound that shattered every illusion of safety, scratching at my front door. Not violent, not animalistic. Soft, frantic, almost pleading scratches like fingernails or bone scraping wood. I approached the door slowly. My hand shook as I looked through the peephole. Nothing, just swirling snow. But the scratching continued, now followed by a low, shuddering moan. Not human, not beast, something in between. I stumbled back, locked every window, every door, shoved furniture against the entrance, and waited. The scratching persisted for over an hour before stopping abruptly. By morning, I'd made up my mind I had to leave. But before packing, I checked the porch. Two things froze my blood: The door frame was gouged deeply as if something had hooked long fingers under it, trying to pull it open. A single footprint stood in the snow facing the cabin, bare, elongated toes, narrow heel. A distorted, unnatural foot shape I've never seen on any creature. I threw my things together and drove out without looking back. A week later, Ranger Clark called me. His voice trembled in a way that didn't fit a man like him. "We found where the prints lead," he said. According to him, a search team tracked the footprints deep into the forest to a hollowed-out pine tree ancient, split wide like a gaping mouth. Inside were bones, dozens, some old, bleached white, others recent, flesh still clinging to them, human and animal. And scattered in the snow surrounding the tree were more footprints, the same elongated shape moving in frantic circles. As if something lived inside that tree, coming out often, too often. Then Clark told me something that's kept me awake at night ever since. There were fresh tracks. Heading toward your cabin, he paused. And fresh tracks leading back. I move states the next month. But sometimes, on especially cold nights, I still dream of those footprints long, deep, circling my cabin again and again. I dream of the dragging fingertips across the frost, and the shadow pressed against the window, watching. And every time it snows heavily, I wake up with the same feeling. It's still out there, looking for me. The blizzard arrived like a wall of white swallowing the entire mountain highway. I had been driving for nearly 2 hours already, heading home from a holiday visit with my brother. The temperature gauge on my dashboard blinked an angry, blue warning that the engine was running too. Cold my heater had stopped working sometime after sunset. And all I had for warmth was a thin jacket and a pair of gloves that did nothing to stop the car's interior from steadily turning into a freezer. The wind howled over the roof like a living thing, pushing the car just enough to make my grip tighten on the wheel. I kept telling myself I would reach a town soon. But there wasn't a single sign of civilization for miles. The blizzard thickened until it felt like I was driving through smoke. Snowflakes smacked against the windshield so violently that even my highest wiper setting struggled to keep up. Each sweep barely cleared a view the size of a dinner plate before more snow glued itself to the glass. Visibility dropped so low the road lines vanished completely, leaving me crawling at the slowest speed my tires could manage without skidding off into a ditch. That's when I saw him. He appeared in the headlights like a ghost standing on the right shoulder of the road, half buried in the swirling snow. I slammed on the brakes, my tires skidding across a slick patch before the car jerked to a stop. The figure didn't move. He was wearing torn winter clothes, a ripped parka that flapped in the wind, and no gloves at all. His hands were blue, fingers stiffened into claw-like shapes. Even through the storm, I could see frost clinging to his eyebrows and beard. He looked like he had been standing there for hours. "Mais Blanger!" I cracked the window an inch just enough for the freezing air to stab its way inside. "Are you okay?" I called out. The man shivered violently, his jaw trembling so hard I heard his teeth clicking. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out, not even a whisper. His eyes were unfocused, as if he was barely conscious. I felt a sick twist in my stomach. Leaving him there would mean watching him freeze to death in real time. I couldn't do that. Even though every instinct told me something was off, I unlocked the passenger door. He climbed in slowly, moving with stiff, jerky motions like his joints were frozen. The cold coming off him hit me instantly. It was beyond normal cold. It radiated like an open freezer door, crawling up my arms and neck even with my jacket on. He shut the door, but didn't buckle the seat belt. He just stared ahead through the windshield, breathing shallow, uneven breaths that fogged the glass in front of him. I put the car into drive and continued slowly along the road, glancing at him every few seconds. He never looked back at me. He didn't move, didn't speak. His breathing was the only sign he was even alive. Do you have a car nearby? I asked. Nothing. Did you get lost hiking? Are you injured? Still nothing. His chest rose and fell too rapidly, as if each breath hurt. The storm hammered at the car, making every second feel like we were trapped in a moving tomb of ice. 10 minutes passed. The cold inside the car worsened. My own breath was now fogging the air. My fingertips stung from numbness. I rubbed them together to warm them, but it barely helped. Then the radio suddenly crackled to life with static. Missing hiker, last seen 3 days ago. Authorities urge drivers to report any sightings. I froze. The description that followed matched the man sitting right next to me down to the torn parka and the missing gloves. I turned slowly toward him, but the passenger seat was empty. My heart stopped. The door was still closed. There was no sound of it opening. No footprints on the floor. No mouvement. No sign that someone had ever been sitting there at all except for one thing. The seat belt was still buckled. My breath quickened as panic surged through me. I slammed my foot on the brake, sending the car sliding to a stop on the icy road. The temperature inside had dropped so drastically that frost was forming along the edges of the windshield. I leaned forward, staring disbelief as the frost spread, délicate branche. That's when I noticed the writing. For shaky words drawn by a finger in the frost on the inside of the windshield. Don't let him in. A wave of cold washed through my chest. My eyes darted to the side mirror and my blood froze. He was standing behind my car. Just standing there in the storm, staring straight at me. Issei! They were wrong clouded, frostbitten lifeless, and yet he watched me, head tilted slightly, as if studying how I would react. I slammed down the gas pedal. The tires spun wildly, before finally catching enough traction to lurch the car forward. I didn't look back, not at first. I wanted to believe he was just another lost soul, a hallucination from the cold. Anything but what my gut told me. But a minute later, I couldn't resist glancing at the rearview mirror. He was still there. Running after the car, fast, too fast for a human body frozen nearly blue. His legs moved in long, unnatural strides that carried him across the snow-covered road with terrifying speed. The wind whipped his torn coat behind him as he chased the car, his pale face locked in a dead stare. I pushed the pedal to the floor. The engine whined. The car slid from side to side, barely gripping the icy road. I didn't care. I just needed to get away. Finally, through the thick curtain of falling snow, I saw light swarm, golden lights glowing from a building up ahead. The ranger station. I swerved into the parking lot and nearly crashed into a snowbank. I didn't even close the door behind me as I ran inside. A ranger stood up in shock, asking what was wrong. But all I could do was stammer about the man in the snow, the missing hiker, the thing chasing me. Another ranger stepped forward slowly and shook his head. You must have imagined him, he said calmly. We found the missing hiker earlier this morning. I blinked at him, confused. He'd been frozen solid. The ranger continued. Estimated time of death 3 days ago. My knees buckled, but the worst part, when they went outside to check my car, the frost writing on the windshield was still there, and trailing away from the parking lot. Fading into the storm were footprints, bare footprints, leading back into the woods, as if something had been standing there, watching, until I ran inside. The ice storm of 2018 was the kind that made the world feel suspended in frozen glass. Every tree coated in thick crystal, every surface slick and shimmering under a pale silver sky. I had gone to stay with my grandmother because her old farmhouse was on higher ground and less likely to flood. Though we both underestimated the crippling power that storm would have. On the first night, the power snapped off with a distant explosion, and the house sank into a dim, frigid silence, save for the crackling of ice forming on the eaves. By the second night, the temperature inside had dipped low enough that our breaths drifted in pale clouds with every exhale. I kept the fireplace alive as best as I could, but even its warmth felt thin and easily swallowed by the vast drafty spaces of the old home. My grandmother frail, soft-spoken, and often drifting into strange stories sat upright in her rocker, wrapped in a thick quilt. She kept telling me she heard someone at the door, but every time I checked, there was nothing but the moaning wind pushing sheets of snow across the porch. The second night, however, everything changed. Just past midnight, 3 deliberate knocks echoed from the back door slow, heavy, spaced out like the caller fully expected someone to open. I remember the exact sensation that spread through my chest, an uneasy weight, like my ribs were tightening around my lungs. Grabbing a flashlight, I made my way down the long, shadow-choked hallway. The knocking came again, louder this time, each thud vibrating through the old wooden frame of the house. When I opened the back door, I was met with an empty porch and a storm so thick it looked like layers of blowing white curtains. But there's no footprint, no dragmark, net been near. I tried to laugh it off, but a cold prickle ran up my spine, and as I turned to shut the door, I felt a presence behind me like someone leaning close, their breath pushing cold air against the back of my neck. Premier Spenarund Beisel. Grandma refused to sleep after that, rocking slowly. Muttering that he's out there again. That always comes by the house gets cold. I assumed she was confusing memories again she. Dee been slipping more often lately, but a trembling fear in her voice made me uneasy. I waited with her until she finally nodded off. Around 3 a.m., I wandered down to the kitchen to refill wood for the fire. That was when I heard it a soft, drawn-out creak from the back door. Not knocking, not wind. The unmistakable sound of old hinges moving under weight. The door was opening. I froze in place, then rushed to the back hallway. The door stood wide open, icy wind pouring in, stinging my cheeks and sending snow swirling across the floor. That's when I saw them, footprints. Wet, slushy, melting footprints that led from the open door into the kitchen. The prints were bare feet, no shoes, no socks. Just direct contact of skin to ice cold wood, but the size was what made my heart nearly stop. Each print was twice the size of mine. Long, wide, heavy. Water pooled inside them as the snow melted, trailing deeper into the house. My voice shook as I called out, "Hello? Who's there?" No response. Only the wind keening through the open doorway. I grabbed the largest knife from the drawer, my hand trembling violently. Following the footprints, I saw they led straight down the hall to my grandmother's bedroom. Isidore went curieuse. It sat loosely in the frame, quivering slightly from the draft. I pushed it open, expecting the worst, and instead found my grandmother sitting upright in her bed. Quilt pushed to her waist, eyes wide with terror, staring into the far corner of the room. "He came back," she whispered, her voice thin and cracking. "Said he used to live here." My blood pressure dropped so fast I felt dizzy. I snapped my flashlight toward the corner she was pointing at. For a fraction of a second, no more, then a blink I saw him, a gaunt figure, crouched in the shadows, like a man forced into an unnatural posture. He was drenched, clothes tattered and soaked, frost growing along his shoulders and hair. His skin was a corpse-like gray-blue, and his eyes sunken, hollow. Glazed with ice glowed faintly in the beam of my flashlight. The instant the light hit him, it flickered violently and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Premier backed away, fumbling with a flat, hot pound emote. When the beam finally returned, the corner was empty. Only melting, wet footprints remained on the old wooden boards. Grandma grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "He freezes to death every winter," she whispered. "He never leaves." I didn't know what that meant, but before I could ask, a loud thud came from the attic directly above us, like someone heavy shifting their weight. Then another, And another. Slow footsteps moved, from one end of the attic to the other. I dragged Grandma out of the room, slamming the door behind us. And we huddled by the fireplace as the footsteps creaked overhead, stopping occasionally as though the figure was listening for us. At one point, the attic steps groaned someone was coming down. I shoved more logs into the fire, the flames roaring to life. That was when the footsteps stopped abruptly. The temperature in the room plummeted so hard frost formed instantly along the window's interior glass. Grandma whispered, "He hates the heat." He always did. She told me the farmhouse once belonged to a man who died in a winter storm over a century ago. His body found frozen in the barn after wandering out in confusion. The family who lived here after swore the house was never the same, that something cold, lost, and confused lingered each winter, seeking shelter, seeking warmth, seeking company. We didn't sleep. Not until dawn broke and the storm eased. The power returned later that afternoon, lights flickering weakly to life. But the strangest part wasn't the melted footprints that left dark stains in the floorboards for months afterward. It was the attic. When I finally built up the courage to check it, I found a set of giant, bare footprints in the dust leading toward the hatch. But none coming back.